Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first joint collaboration with the CBRC Sales and Marketing Council. This is our 2022 market overview with the lovely Mollie Carmichael of Zonda Home. Just to kick things off, we want to say thank you and good morning. My name is Kate Porosinian, and I'm with Unscripted Interior Design. I'm also, more importantly, the chair of the Sales and Marketing Council, and really excited to bring this amazing content with you all. But we couldn't do that without our sponsors. So Ferguson, BAC, Colton Mortgage, Open Door, Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, Lifescape, Kohler Signature Store, Pella, and Kitchler. Thank you all so much for joining us. Also, at the end of our presentation today, you will be receiving an email with a questionnaire. So if you could take a couple minutes to check that out, that would be really helpful because we really want to provide content that you all are engaged and excited about. Looking at this slide, if you want to check out our events for the year, the SMC's next event is actually in April. It's the second part to our Chris Hartley Zoom series, super exciting, motivational series. So if you want to check that out, but greater picture, our HBA does have our member advantage breakfast. Shout out Katie on Thursday at 8 o'clock. If you can be there, that would be awesome. As well as our CBRC's happy hour on the 16th at Lifescape, Colorado. So without further ado, we want to jump right into the presentation. I know you guys joined not to hear from me, but the lovely Mollie Carmichael, a woman who needs very little introduction other than, I can't believe there's no way you've had 30 years of experience. Yeah, there's no way. I mean, were you in elementary school when you started?
Bless you, Kate. Bless you.
And one of the principals of Zonda Home, but what literally she is the powerhouse of all things trend and what is happening with the consumer market across the country, speaks, I think, on every platform possible within our industry and is quoted in every magazine relative to our industry. I mean, literally, we are so honored to have her join us this morning and take time out of her very busy schedule to impart her wisdom and knowledge in such a crazy market. So without further ado, thank you, Mollie, so much, and good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. That's about the nicest introduction I think I've ever had, so very sweet. Well, welcome, everyone. It certainly is a crazy time, and you know, it's so funny, but this morning I was like, was it just a year ago that we literally started out with the vaccine about this time, and everyone felt by the end of next year like we'd be in such a different place? And here we are doing a virtual again. But I would tell you that's probably going to be a big trend that we talk about a little bit. And in addition to that, what's also really interesting is just to see how well you guys did last year. I mean, it was a stellar year. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to dive right in. But it's been pretty interesting to see what's going on. Did everything come up okay, Kate and Connie? You're good. Okay. So let's dive in. I've got again, all of you know me. If you need help, I'm here. I won't bore you with the background there. As far as today's agenda, I'll do just a little sort of big picture of kind of the pieces we do. We're going to do the top 21's top search trends, not my political views. I want to underscore, someone made a funny comment to me in another market that I actually presented that on. But I think it's a really good way to sort of start this presentation to really look at what was everybody thinking about last year, searching online, what came out of that. It's a quick 2-minute video. Then we're going to look at sort of big picture demographics and Denver's relationship to that, and some of the market health things, and really look at what a banner year you guys had last year, combined with housing trends. I'm shocked how well so many different markets have done, but Denver particularly had a fantastic year. And then we'll just hit sort of the top 10 builders and top 10 projects that came out. And then we'll look at true consumer and housing trends. That's the stuff that I really love to talk about. So the stuff we'll talk about beforehand, I'll probably zip through it somewhat quickly. You'll have a recording if you want to go back through it. But I do think it's relevant as we sort of talk about why the trends are shifting the way they're shifting. and why people want certain things. So with that, but before I begin, I have to hit sort of football. Did everybody watch yesterday? And hopefully your team won. Go Rams. I was so excited that they actually won. And so for all of you, I hope you enjoyed the game. They're two of probably the best playoff games I've ever seen. So I'm predicting the Rams will win, knock on wood. And I think we should get a pool going, or maybe some sort of something going for the Denver SMC for everybody, and be interesting to see where everybody thinks the vote's going to go. But it should be a great game. So with that, just a little bit about us, and I really like to always share this piece. This is kind of all that we do, and we're going to cover quite a bit today. So really understanding the market, because that's going to impact the kind of product you want to start planning for. So if the market's going up or if the market's going down, that's going to impact price points, the kind of positioning, all of that. The demographic piece, of course, where is it shifting to? Because it really is shifting quite a bit finally right now. Denver certainly has been a huge magnet for millennials, but we'll look at sort of the overall shifts combined. We also do look at housing demand by life stage. That will sort of naturally come out of the demographic stuff. We will not go through a demand model for Denver. And then, of course, understanding what consumers said they wanted last year in 2021 in your market. We had 650 responses in the Denver market for 2021, so pretty solid sample. And then we'll look at some of the things that came out of just housing trends. And we'll see some specific sort of design product consumer solutions as we hit the very end. So we're going to do that quick video. So 2021's top search trends by Google. And I will tell you, the beginning is depressing, but it ends on a positive note. So hang in there and we'll dive right in. Okay. So let's see if that will go.
It has been extremely challenging for me. I am broken. And I am healing.
I'm here at the memorial wall. I wanted to do something to remember my mom.
For some reason, I'm having anxiety. Obviously, it's normal with everything that's going on right now.
I think I'm going to take a break for a while.
You can get through it. And if you can get through it, there's a greater reward on the other side.
Just like anybody else, I'm just trying to do my little part to try and save my community.
I'm just really excited we're back open.
And I am finally going to
Yourself in the mirror and you're just like, there I am.
Be your best. Never, ever, ever stop dreaming. I don't care what they tell you.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, find the defendant guilty.
We are not drowning. We are fighting. Injustice. No action is too slow.
We just have to band together as a community and get people's lives back.
Even as we even as we hurt and close, that even as we're tired, we try that will forever be tied together, victorious.
And I'm going to try to get out of that loop. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation. So you can see just, we're still in a lot of change. And I would say the biggest trend for this last year and coming into this next year is we're really we've been through all this anxiety and stress. And I would tell you, there's a lot of commotion out there as to what they believe and don't believe. But I definitely think we saw a year of people really coming together, and a year of a lot of people just thinking, okay, I need to take control. I need to be self-sustainable, and I need to have a voice. But at the same time, we're seeing so much more cocooning and things like that. So we're going to talk through some of how that translates to home designs, and even just how you look at the whole year and maybe even the next 3 to 5 years as you plan your strategies. So it's really interesting. And I love the word believe. I love seeing that believe in that presentation, because I think people are excited about the future, but they're cautious. And so that's a big part of it. So happy 2022. I don't think I've ever been so excited to see a year leave ever, albeit it was a great year, I think, for all of us in business. So let's look a little bit at demographics, because I think this is a pretty big deal. When we start to look at sort of where the market is today, we're finally seeing those millennials really come in sort of full steam, and same thing with the boomers. So while there is this concern and talk about a bubble, we're looking at the stock market, we're looking at all kinds of things that are just starting to shift a little. I think the one thing that's very different today, though, is the right people are turning the right ages for our housing market, and that could impact us in a very positive way still for another 5 to 10 years. So if you look at the most mobile segments, you'll start to see 25 to 35. It's literally, it's when they're getting married, right? And so whether it's renter or owner, we're seeing that they're very mobile between 27 and 38. And then the most mobile for 55 to 64 is technically 57 up to age, all the way up to just a little bit past it at 67. And again, those are the biggest numbers you have there. So when we look at that and we look all over the US, still your number one buyer profile for sure, and you're going to see this on the next page, is that family segment. But there's a close rival now with that boomer buyer, that young boomer that's now ready and really cashing out. So they're starting, the big thing in the last recession was they did not feel like they were getting that equity they wanted. And now we're seeing a huge release in equity, and they're moving to the rental market, as you saw some reference to on the prior page, but they're also cashing out and moving to other markets like California. We're still seeing quite an exodus to other markets, including Denver, even today, as Denver's just become, frankly, a lot less affordable. And I'm sure all of you are feeling that. So when we looked at really the closings for 2021, and we looked at the top segments, the number one segment by a landslide is a young family. So the second closest, which is nowhere near that for total closings in 2021, was what we call elite. And that tends to be the most expensive price points, still a pretty significant segment. And it does tend to be an older household. So it does tend to be more of the mature couple, frankly, with lots of equity, or mature family. And you can see as it goes down, you'll see we really don't get to no children until you get into these categories here. So high family segments, obviously moving today. And then I do love to underscore that really the definition of family is so evolving today, and just being aware of that, and your targeting and all of that stuff, you know, it continues to shift. So as we look to the overall US and we look at overall household growth still looks very strong for Denver. We'll see strong growth over the next 5 years, but much of that growth, as you're going to see, one is going to come from other markets, but we're also going to lose some growth too. And so you'll see that too. So Denver tends to benefit certainly from in-migration. It's still absolutely in the right category for 2021 and going forward. And as you can see with affordability, this the blue map below, the brown represents least affordable, darkest blue represents most affordable. So you can see Denver almost looks like California now, unfortunately, as it relates to affordability. So California does have the highest rate of moves out, sadly, per capita, And that's because it's ridiculously unaffordable. But in addition to that, I think the political environment, and there are other issues I think that are impacting that as well. When we look at actually migration and really where people are coming from into Denver, almost 80% are local. The other 22%, the top, the number one is coming from California. Certainly of that 22%, you're seeing about 20% of those just coming from LA and the Bay Area alone. And again, it's people cashing out. I really am starting to see in the Denver market a much bigger migration of now that older buyer, sort of mature couples coming in with more wealth. And I think they're going to continue to follow their kids into Denver. And we're certainly seeing that in Texas as well for the very first time. So here's the other challenge with Denver is we're now seeing more people moving out of Denver saying, hey, I came here, mostly renters that were here and wanted to come here for affordability. They were young millennials and they're leaving. And they're leaving, frankly, because there aren't great solutions today for affordable housing in Denver. It's pretty challenging. And so that's a really big deal as you guys think about your planning for the next, not only year, but for the next 2 to 3 years. So obviously equity is fueling the market. You're going to see that in your numbers because you still had a banner year despite the fact that prices have risen so much. And definitely we're seeing that renters are just, again, as I mentioned, challenged to convert. Overall affordability, as you can see now on a bigger scale, it's definitely much less affordable in Denver today. And it's close to some affordable areas around it. We're still seeing some flocking out to areas like Denver. We're seeing growth, particularly in Austin, Nashville. Seattle used to be a magnet, no longer because it's even more expensive than Denver. It's kind of crazy right now. The other challenge you have is just what's going on with interest rates. So we just saw a bump in interest rates here. And as you know, 1% change in interest rates. So if you follow this slide here, you'll see that how the price adjusts with just a shift in 1% for interest rates. So if I'm at 2.5%, my price goes from 235 to 211. If I'm at 2.5 to 4.5%, my price could drop to 190,000. Now that assumes same demand, not the kind of pressure that you have today, but it is the threat that you have out there as rates continue to go up and people will pause because certainly they're looking at it and their affordability shifting. And then the desirability and what they can purchase starts to shift. So that becomes a bigger element. So as you look at overall that 1% shift in trends, you can actually see we've literally almost seen it's about a 15% to 17% shift in home prices. So this is the overall, if you look here, the 30-year fixed rate, it went up 1%. That 1% did impact, if you look at the end of the year, and specifically for Denver, you'll see it's anywhere from 17 to 19% increases in price. It'll be interesting to see if it impacts it the other direction as rates have gone up. The other challenge out there is just inflation. We're seeing things like lumber just going up dramatically. We've got lumber up is about almost to $20,000 since last summer. And you can see the increases happening in the later part of 2021 for sure. So obviously just challenges making all of this stuff work, but luckily prices have been there to absorb that. So I do think that they're expecting more increases this year, unfortunately. So if we look at the overall increases or projections for 2020 and 2021, these were pretty accurate and they're still projecting about another 7% this year. So again, just things to think about as you're planning and how do we get through this and still end up with the right product, the right solution, and sales and pricing continue to go the right direction. As we look at overall job growth and employment, it's fantastic. You guys had great growth in 2021, and the forecast is even greater for 2022 with 4.5% growth in the Denver market. So this is all Denver. Total households and total household growth, again, all going positively in the right direction. If we look at overall housing supply in Denver and housing demand, we are seeing now where there is an undersupply, obviously, of housing, and much of that's just getting constricted as to what can actually hit the market because of some of the labor shortages, some of the supply issues, and we're seeing that all over the country, which is causing even more pressure on sales and prices. As we look at housing trends, this is pretty spectacular. But when we look at the overall total median sales price, now this is actually sales prices coming from Redfin. So it's going to be slightly different than the numbers I'm going to show you from Zonda for new home closed prices. But you'll actually see the trend going up for Denver is quite dramatic, but it's quite dramatic in a lot of sort of those markets like Seattle. Certainly I threw LA in there, Boston, where we have more of that strong in-migration coming in and certainly a strong housing market. Actually, LA is losing quite a bit, I have to be honest. So, but you can see the push on what's going on with prices. If we look at just the last year, it went from 455 to 540. And by the way, square footages did not shift dramatically. It's up 19% just for the last 12 months. And we look at price per square foot, it went from 226 a square foot to 261. If we go all the way back to 2012, it was at $92 a square foot versus 261 today. I mean, that's staggering. I mean, that is just some huge growth that the market has absorbed, and you'll see in sales that it's supporting it just fine. So average new and existing closed prices for the year, you'll actually see they're up about 17% for both existing and for new. And you'll see they actually sort of came together here in about May, but it seems to be getting closer and closer together. And oftentimes in the existing market, they are selling just a bigger house than new. So if we did like for like, I think you'd see a much bigger spread there. When we look at overall new closing price, the number is a little bit smaller, but the actual closed price is 17%. I did want to show the square footages there of the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Housing is getting a little bit bigger, and it's about just 100 square feet. And to some degree, square footage is going to need to start dropping to meet affordability, especially as much as prices have increased last year. And I just think coming out of, COVID for a large part, I mean, there was some just great excitement and huge sales activity. And I think really that anxiety that we saw in all of those trends is people just wanting to control their destiny in a lot of ways, including where they work and their children and their whole household, and even this whole cocooning phenomenon that I think we're starting to see quite a bit of. And I don't think that goes away for some time. So when we look at overall, the percentage that actually sold over list price, the high here was actually in June. 75% of all of the listed homes actually sold above list price, which is crazy. So if we look at 2021, I mean, look how much that went up last year just because of the demand and frankly, lack of supply. And the lack of supply is really, I think, what's pushing that extra bump. When we look at overall total annual sales, look at that. I mean, who knew going through COVID, you would see the kind of growth you saw from 2019 to 2020. We had our recovery year, or so we're thinking, and it was just a banner year at over 62,000 closings and about a 4% increase from an already very fantastic year the year before. New home closings themselves, a little over 11,000 sales. The average sales rate, again, fantastic at 3.3, particularly given the price increases. To see it sell that fast is just terrific. Overall inventory, look at that. I mean, I went back for like 20 years and that's the lowest number you can see. So substantially low from a supply perspective. And when we look at overall total months of supply, I don't think I've seen a market that's at 0.3 months of supply for Denver. So that's the closing end of 2021, and 2.2 is fantastic. Traditionally, the average healthy months of supply is about 4 months of supply. So you can see how anemic this is by comparison. Total days on market are equally anemic with less than 7 days sitting on the market. So there definitely is room to raise some prices here. And when we look at the overall finished vacant lots, this is the part that is challenging. I think creates some anxiety amongst not just the construction team, but the sales team. I mean, all the builders are looking at this and just saying, oh my God, I just have to figure out how to get more supply on the market. And right now we have less than a month of finished vacant lots on the market. So with that, you can see very strong housing market, very strong, lots of pressure on prices. The key is we just need the supply to be able to fulfill this. Just a couple of slides on the top 20, the top 10 performers. As we look at the top 10 new home builders for last year, Richmond American, of course, comes up at top. They've been at the top for quite some time, followed by Lennar, and then Century, KB, Meritage, Clayton, D.R. Horton, Taylor Morrison, Toll Brothers, and Shea Homes. One of the key things I think to look at this, you can see actually there are vacant developed lots too. One of the key things I think you want to look at here too is just the strategy behind some of those builders and what it takes to actually get to those kinds of closings, right? So it really is definitely a value play in Denver that's winning big. But there's certainly a lot of diversity and opportunity out there to provide different solutions. And in my opinion, affordability, there's a lot of different ways to slice that, right? When we look at the top 10 new home neighborhoods from a closing perspective, you can see the top 10 too from 2021. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with these two, but same thing. I mean, they're affordable solutions. They're not just single family detached. And we've got a lot of attached or higher density programs certainly hitting the market today. So now for the fun stuff that I love, let's go into the consumer and housing opportunity and where the big trends are based on everything that we're seeing out there in the market as we look back at 2021 and we look forward to 2022. So I just think it's so huge to know your audience first. I think they're the roadmap to everything. And so we're going to look at some of those things as we look forward. So I think the biggest opportunity as we come out of all the stuff we've been through is it's really rethinking what life design is today. So I think it's not only better design, but I think it's a better design for how we're living. I mean, think of the number of people, whether you're in the office, working at home, how much where you have spent your time and the spaces you're living in have shifted in the last year to 2 years. It's just a new life that we're living in today. And we'll talk a lot about those spaces and how those are shifting. So looking forward to 2022, how do we make that happen? And it was really funny. I was talking to Kate beforehand, and, you know, from a design perspective, I think everyone's so sick of talking about COVID, presenting on COVID, even coming up with life solutions for COVID. But the reality is this isn't a COVID anymore. This is just a shift in how we live, how we work, how we play. And so try to shift that mentality to just a better way to live. Because I don't know about all of you, but it gave me some time, I think, to look back at my own life and how I was living and maybe invest a little bit more in the places I should be. So it's both been challenging and rewarding at the same time. So without a doubt, I always like to start with the customers, the brand. If you're not shifting your entire sales and marketing strategies to talking about them instead of talking about you, that's a huge mistake. They just have way too much to access today. So everything that you're talking about should be about what they want, not about what you offer. So understanding their values, what they want, and really focusing on what they'll pay for and how they're shopping. I think as we look to 2022 and the affordability issues with inflation, with rising interest rates, with stock market issues, I don't think we're going to see as smooth of a year in 2022 as it relates to sales and rising prices as we did in 2021, albeit I do think it will still be a strong year. The other thing too is we ask consumers what they want first. Certainly number one is location, location, location. But number two very strongly sits with home design. And so when you look at the relationship to even, you know, in COVID, post-COVID, if you can call what we're in right now, post-COVID, home design is probably more important than it ever has been, but it's really getting the space and the functionality where it needs to be. And then really just balancing out how we're using home, I think is such a big deal. But also the other big thing that shifted too is safety, believe it or not, was not number 4. Safety was actually a ways down, and things like accessibility followed price. Schools traditionally stay in the category that it's in today. But it's interesting to see the movement of safety for consumers today. And so all things on how you landscape, how you think about community entrances, how you think about even as you walk into that home, safety should be a big focus in a very comfortable, approachable way. This is something I've presented on for years and years and years, but again, she and he have more balance than ever in trying to figure out how to manage this new life. So whether kids are in quarantine too again or not, there's always the fear that that can happen again. And even working at home, there's always the fear of, I need to prepare, I need to have control. So women today, these are crazy facts, they control 51% of the wealth. They control 85% of all consumer purchases, which is about $20 trillion worldwide. And for home, they're the second largest consumer following the family segment. So single women, 1 in 5 consumers over 55 is actually a single woman, and that number is actually growing. And of course, the major influence in purchasing of a home is 92% led by a woman. And the reason I bring this up isn't, you know, to shout the she power flag, because we certainly have heard a lot of that over the last several years, but it is to underscore just the importance of making sure that you're getting that feedback and that input into the design process. Because I've been doing this longer than I'd like to admit. And oftentimes it's 99% men, and that's fine as long as you're bringing in that input and really looking at what and where that's important. But same thing from a sales and marketing perspective is just how you market to that female today, given the fact that she is making a big portion of those decisions. And it's real. So get ready. When you look at the left brain, they want to go out there and shop with the facts, right? But the right brain really wants you to shop with solutions. So I want a 3-bedroom, a 3-car garage, a big backyard, place where I get you list all the things that you want. But really what you want when you walk into those homes or anywhere is you want solutions. Help make my life better. And right brain actually is the deciding part of your brain. It is the decision making that happens. The left brain, those are the things that you really need to have, but the right brain is the things you have to have when you look at sort of how it solves for life. So I always like to use these as simple solutions. So Uber Eats and all things like Uber Eats have just been a huge solution. Or think about just Amazon Fresh. I don't think I hardly ever go to a grocery store anymore. And so technology used to be almost a nervous thing, like maybe one day. Now it's just convenience all around you and completely being used. Same thing with your Apple Watch, tracking down. They can literally track, ahead of time if you're going to have a heart attack. If you fall on it, we'll call for you. I mean, it's crazy. And then of course, hopefully all of you guys have Enterprise or are working with Enterprise. We've completely transformed our Zonda application too. And it's all things that we're looking for in the home, all design that's just going to give us more time and convenience, right? To serve it up simple. And that's in merchandising, that's in home design, that's in community design. And certainly we're trying to play our part as well. Top challenges, the biggest obstacles, no big surprise in 2021, it's affordability. with 17 to 19% increases in prices. How could it not be? But that number is dramatically bigger than anything else. Now, almost half those consumers have come into all of the sales offices or at least talked to somebody and is shopping online to what's out there in the Denver market. And almost half are still saying, I just can't find it. Now, that could be as simple as I can't find anything that I can afford, but it also could be design solutions as well. There's still 1 in 3 that are concerned for COVID-19. That used to be a much bigger number. And 41% said, gosh, no obstacles at all. So certainly we're seeing people move and buy out there, given your banner year last year. So when we look at sort of lifestyle improvements, people always ask, like, what does home design mean? Well, it still ends up in those top 2 categories as they were last year, but it does start with interior style with a much closer percentage to functional space. So it's only 1% difference between just give me a better style to more function, and larger everything still lands on the bottom. So don't be afraid to go smaller to be able to reach those affordable price points that customers want today. As long as you can get to function, and there's some really cool floor plans that we worked with different architects on to get to still getting, the 3-bedroom with an office, crash space downstairs, having great outdoor spaces. You just really thinking through some of that stuff. There's some really great solutions, and you have fantastic architects in the Denver market, but there's architects all over looking at this today. Even just something as simple, this is a 1-bedroom flat, just making this space feel great. And oftentimes it's just having the right light and openness to that apartment. Sorry. The other part too is just looking at fun, creative ways that you can create efficient space. So if you have to go smaller in things like a dining room, make it cool and fun. Don't make it so the chairs are hitting the island and you have to sort of like shimmy your way through to get to that. And we've all watched that model, right? Where we're like, okay, well, we're going to get like a child-sized dining room table in here because just simply the space isn't there. And we're just spending way too much time at home to have a child-sized dining room table today. So just kind of, doing something fun and interesting. So interior style, I always like to share on this one. As we look to traditional versus modern, it's even more modern this last year than it was prior to that. So we're almost at 70% for interior modern stylings actually being preferred. I will say though, in both interior and exterior, it is a somewhat modern, not an extreme modern. So whenever we do qualitative and we show these pictures versus these pictures, they'll point to a kitchen like the lower left and say, well, that's kind of modern. I mean, I really want somewhat modern. I don't want extreme modern. So be careful on how modern you go, because it's really kind of modern traditional or modern casual that they're really looking for today. But there is about 15 to 17% that are extreme modern. I always have that debate with Mike Woodley because he's like, nope, you either got to be modern or traditional. And I'm like, well, not the consumer, unfortunately. So I do get that you want to go there. The other thing too is just when you look back at this last year and even 2 years, but just in 2021, how do people want to spend their time? And certainly number one is with family. The percentage that want to spend time with family and neighbors, the neighbor percentage is actually very, very high. Usually it's with family and then private away from it all. So you have a much more social consumer. And I think it's because you have a younger consumer and they want their kids to meet the neighbors. It's a whole dynamic that happens, particularly when you have younger kids. And then you can start to see outdoor fitness, lifelong learning for education, and then at the very bottom, involved with community activities. So one of the trends we talked about is I think you are seeing a huge percentage of people just naturally cocooning at home and just feeling safer at home. And it's not even just safer from the virus. It's just we have been taught over a year to 2 years now to enjoy being at home. I mean, the time that I spend out of my home in comparison to pre-COVID is so different. And people are just, at first it was, oh, this is temporary. Then it was, oh God, what am I going to do with this? And now it's, I really just want to stay home. And so I think we're really seeing this whole cocooning thing happening and nesting thing happening. And it's just converted from almost a challenge to a luxury, and just making that home space feel great. So huge. The other big thing too is not just in home, but in the community. The number one thing they want is technology. And with a very close second, a simple life. And then number 3 is healthy living. But the technology and healthy living today is really the key areas that you can make a difference in both design, how you present community, and frankly, how you talk to consumers and how you guys have designed your strategy and why you're so substantially different to the other, 50,000 plus sales that are happening, in other categories. So if you have a little over 11,000 that are new, and I think it was around 54,000 total, if I'm remembering the numbers right, your competition is far more on the resale side than it's ever going to be on the new home side, right? So you're looking at a substantial amount of competition in the resale market. Getting just some simple things in the healthy living department and technology really can help you to stand apart. And post-COVID, super logical. The other big trend that we're seeing is just this huge digital transformation in so many other categories. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I think we're going to start to see virtual everything. I don't know that I'm personally a fan of everything going virtual, but it certainly is that time, convenience, and in a lot of cases, it can just be smarter, right? So even, I made some notes on this, but even as far as teaching our kids and even health solutions, this is actually called EndeavorX. It's a video game that they created. Instead of giving your kids medication for ADHD, this is you literally have to get a prescription for this. But this is the way we're changing as far as virtual solutions today. It's not just ordering groceries online and all the time and convenience thing we're just, that we're using on Amazon and other platforms, but even just looking at education different, even as we look at, medical solutions for all of us. So today we thought so hard, and all the special little details that went into the parks and how they, translated, still really critical today. But as critical when you're thinking about whether it's 100-unit neighborhood or a whole master plan, thinking through the virtual playgrounds, I think is something to really be thought of today, and even brand within your neighborhoods, and even create ways that the kids just in the neighborhood can play together, because their playgrounds are virtual today. Their social networks are virtual today. Their learning platforms are virtual today. Their education is not only virtual today, but it's going to completely continue to reform. And I always state this and have been really interested in the virtual education side for quite some time. If you're downtown Denver and you don't have great educational scores, it should no longer be handcuffs to you. You can literally play on the same playing field as, some of the best schools anywhere in the Denver area with the right educational platform presented in a virtual way. But we just will really have a much larger platform of virtual choice. And as all of you in the sales and marketing world can realize, we're seeing huge transformations there, not just from the home builder, but even as we look at platforms like BuzzBuzz, how do you actually provide solutions that, feel like you're walking it yourself in person? And how do you all the way through the entire process? So things just simple like upgrade packages. So being able to come up with packages, the customer, we asked them, what kind of packages do you want? Everyone was so convinced it was individual choice for sure. Well, they really like the idea of having a professional designer pick it for them. And I think if you haven't heard me say this before in past presentations, I went through a whole kitchen remodel. I've been doing this for 30 years. It was painful when I had to pick it for myself. I have no problem picking up for other people. But 76% said, you know what? I really love the idea of having professionally designed packages that I can choose from. And then from there, if you let them have those choices, easy packages that they can click and buy and go, you know, working with your designers, you're clearly still going to have a virtual model. Now you're going to have a virtual model and you're going to have a physical model, because so many of them, it's a little over, I think 85% that said they would even consider, you know, going the other direction. So we still are going to have quite some time where they're going to physically want to touch and feel and see all that stuff. But at the same time, the virtual selection process, we're going to see more and more converting over to wanting to buy online or see so much of it online. So, and we're seeing that clearly today, but it's going to get a lot more real throughout the whole process. And I think it's going to flow much softer and easier as we continue to look at our virtual world going forward. At home work environments, obviously you all know that's huge. Some of you are working at home today. I've been working at home for, gosh, 2 years now, which is so wild. But it used to be you have to work at home. Now people want to work at home, and you're going to see some staggering facts on this. But think about why. I mean, it feels safe. Frankly, it's easier, time, convenience, all the things we just talked about. Many don't think it's over, right? We need more life balance. You know, many had learned to make it work financially, lack of trust. It's a proven working model. I mean, our company, half the employees that used to come into the office now work permanently at home at their choice. And last but not least, as we look at this resignation era, as they're calling it, we have this huge employee shortage. And we're seeing employees literally say, hey, if you can't accommodate this, then I'll go somewhere else. And so that all together has really shifted, almost commanding this at-home work environment. So when you'll see some of the numbers as it relates to what consumers said they wanted, but we're definitely seeing those numbers shift and how you make that work. And it doesn't have to be full 10 by 10 offices to accommodate everybody, but it's making sure whether it's 650 square feet or 2,500 square feet that you are accommodating a bedroom, a guest room, and an office. And for the 650 square foot home, it's the office is the dining room table, but it's got to be functional and work well together. The guest room could be the fold out couch. And of course, the bedroom is the bedroom. So you just have to think through all of that very carefully, because it's no longer a like to have, it's a, no, I can't move without that. And it's a big changer. But if we look at actually the home office as it relates to education, it's really wild. We took a band of 37 to 41-year-olds. And if you look at, and you'll start to see this, if you look at those that have a bachelor degree, and frankly, it ties more to the type of job they have, I think, really, as it relates to education, you'll see about 36 to 39% are actually working at home. When we get to some college, it drops to about 20, 18 to 20. And when we get to no college at all, those that really probably need to be home with their kids and some of that, it drops down, in half to 7 to 10%. And when we see less than high school, it's even lower than that, because they're likely working in more service jobs and things like that. But you can actually see a tie between not only education, it's likely tied with affluence as well. So as you're getting to the new home market, which is really a privileged buyer to buy in this market, the need for that home office, it's close to half that are working at home. 1 in 5 actually wants 2 offices in their home today. So that's about 20%. And 1 in 20 wants 3 offices, or at least 3 functioning spaces that live like offices. So that's probably some of the biggest shifts we've seen in the last year. So just that at-home efficient tech space, kind of figuring out, how do I not take up an entire bedroom, but cool, spaces that I'm going to be in for me, it's 12 hours a day. The other thing too is just WeWork spaces in the community. How do you create sort of even smaller, large, flexible workspaces? And we'll talk a little bit about that too in this presentation. The other big things on healthy living and clean air, clean water. We asked if they paid $1,200 last year. 80% said yes. 70% said yes to clean air as well. Other big features that they're looking for, virtual monitoring with cameras on the front door. I mean, these are all pretty typical things, the remote key access, security systems of all kinds. And I I would underscore that. For example, in the for rent market or the condominium market, you know, they're tracking everybody who goes through the parking garage by their license plate. There's facial recognition. So if somebody walks in that doesn't belong there, it's instantly caught. And those are the kinds of things that really give you that security that can really, really make a difference. So green is also growing in this market. 45% want solar, 33% are willing to pay for net zero. Self-sufficiency wanted. So if you look at this, this was crazy. So we asked this question last year. We thought they might like it, but think about what happened in Texas where they had the freeze and everybody learned about that. And so people got very nervous about that. Over 80% they would pay. And by the way, this is Tesla's price for their backup battery. Sorry, I have batter in there. But over 80% they'd pay that amount for that backup battery. So those are just some things, again, that can really just set you apart. The importance of private outdoor space, that's always been the case. I think the surprise is often it's about privacy first, then entertainment. It's pretty consistent in almost every market. And for that older, more affluent, the more affluent they are, the more they want that privacy first. So when you're looking at more affordable solutions or trying to create, whether it's a for rent or more luxury for sale, coming up with creative solutions to make that private, I think is a really big deal. And then there's that other green that's so important too, which is just bringing the green on the inside. And when you look at this space, that green not only adds just an awe feel, right? Like, oh, this is so great, but it also creates the privacy. I mean, it's a privacy factor too that they just talked about. So whether it's mid-rise or again, single family detached, it's just bringing that green into all of those spaces that adds a premium, frankly, that just doesn't cost a lot. These are some European solutions. And so it's just always interesting to look at the value that green can add. The other categories that I thought were important is just because we're, you know, cocooning and staying at home, these little spaces are so important. And so we asked them if they would take a smaller yard if we set it up for entertainment. This is like a 12-foot side yard, by the way. 67% said yes. And then we asked if they would take a smaller yard if we gave them the fireplace, and 78% said yes. So again, just other ways, those land residuals or the price for land is skyrocketing with home prices. So to make that work, I could do the math for you guys, but you guys do this all day long. It can really make a difference. The cost is certainly outweighed by the cost of the land. The other big thing I'm hearing out in the market is single family for rent is really becoming competition for the new home world. And frankly, not just in choice, but in land deals. So people going out to buy land, and we have so many investors out in the market that are looking at single family for rent. And I would tell you, the numbers are about a little over 20% of those shopping for a new home in your market that said, hey, I'd consider renting first as long as it was a single family detached community. So that's going to be more competition. Other things that when you look at sort of club room amenities and things like that, this is really cute, but in Denver, the #1 club room amenity was a pet washing station. And then we also Wi-Fi cafe, just, you know, having that third place inside the community because we're not leaving home anymore. The game room, as we talked about, it's the average playground today. So it's how you used to think about your parks. You should be thinking about game rooms. And then of course we talked about co-working space. So when you're thinking about community, it's a new kind of life that we're planning for today than we talked about 2 years ago. Exterior styles, certainly we're now officially over the hump and 52% want modern. But look at this, it's definitely in the somewhat modern. So I want to underscore, as you look at it, it's more like modern farmhouse, not extreme contemporary. Craftsman's #2, transitional's #1, and this picture is right out of Denver. And of course that came from Mike Woodley was the architect on that. But as you look to architecture as a whole, just spend it where it counts. I mean, look how beautiful modern. This one is in the upper left. It has 2 truss lines and 1 down the middle. versus this craftsman home, which is fantastic, is so much more expensive to build. I mean, look at the corbels and the, you know, variation in the roof lines, and even this modern home, which is lovely. It just does not have to be that complicated. And frankly, they don't want extreme modern. When I've done qualitative groups, oftentimes they'll take this house and they love the texture of it, but they'll say, I don't know if that's going to be cool in 5 years. So just, I think it's that modern traditional where you've got kind of traditional veins and some modern with the glass. The number one thing they comment on is how that home is going to live from the inside out. And that's a big part to think about. So these are some common transitional, certainly, that have been very, very popular. It does tend to be more of the prairie style roof lines, but even this is kind of a new favorite. It's been very popular as well. That's a lot of this is actually in Seattle, and I suspect to see more of this coming to Denver. Modern experiences on the master plan side. So just a little pop of color, again, simple forms, lots of glass. Even in the outdoor spaces, I think are so important. And just the value of art at any density. I think people are craving positive energy on the whole. And as we wrap up here too, texture, color, just character. When people really need that energy from all of you today. So there's so much more. We definitely can do all kinds of design, you know, by segmentation and by consumer group. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I tried to put as much as I could in there that would apply to your world, but just in short, you guys had a banner year last year. There's so much opportunity to still stay in first place with the consumer. It's just adjusting as much as you can to life today and life going forward, because it's certainly shifting for all of us. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kate. I just love being here with you guys. Denver's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite. So I just appreciate the opportunity to share with you and celebrate the last year and look forward to the next year.
Thank you, Molly, so much. Oh my gosh, so much information to process and to celebrate. We have so many people on the call. I just want to double check. Does anybody have any quick questions, follow-up, feedback, any comments before we hop off? I know everyone's very busy.
I have a quick question, Kate, Molly.
Yes.
In the green aspect, do you have any research around electric cars? Because I've been hearing about two different sides.
We did. And you know what? If you can email me, my email's right there. Email me. I'll give you the stats on that. They're ridiculously off the charts of the number of people that would, I want to say it's a little over 80% said they would pay $800 to have the electric car charging in their homes. And it's logical, right? I mean, especially with gas prices going up as high as they've gone up. If you look at the acceleration just of electric vehicles, imagine, and everybody gets quoted like, oh, it's going to be $2,000 with that electric car charging station in your garage. It's not, but at the end of the day, it just makes it more convenient. I know I don't have one today, but I plan to. And my husband and I are constantly looking at like, what is that next car? And I just think it's inevitable.
Stephanie with Remax asked, Molly, do you know where the greatest building activity is happening in Denver Metro? Is it going north or are we going south?
I could answer that too. And I don't necessarily have that. You know, there are pockets, right? So I think it's more going northeast and it's certainly going south too, but it's a totally different market, as you guys know. I'm going to say more north first, and then I'm going to say south following that. And I think we're pushing up through to Loveland and even up to as far as like Fort Collins. That I think is going to continue to be opportunity for the person who, you know, I mean, Longmont's already getting built out. I mean, if you look at all of Denver, it's amazing to see how much is getting built out and how far it's pushing. But I suspect it's going to continue to push more north first. But there's certainly a lot of activity south.
Myra had a quick question regarding remodels. She knows that this is primarily focused on new existing homes. Was wondering if there was any data you could share on renovations, like aging in place, etc. Yeah.
So, you know, what's really interesting is I've done consumer preference studies in both the existing and new home world to benchmark that. So I partnered with Zillow. The only difference in preferences, there were no difference stylistically. There were no differences in what they wanted in their home. The biggest difference between the resale buyer and the new home buyer is the resale buyer wants more square footage for a lower price, and they're willing to compromise used versus new. There was no difference in style preferences. And as far as aging in place goes, we do have numbers on the active adult buyer and how many people want to stay home. It really comes down to choice. What can I afford and where can I stay? So yes, people want to stay in their home, but oftentimes it's really the financial side of things. And I can talk to this specifically in LA. It just comes to a point where your mortgage payment is so expensive that becomes your retirement plan. And I suspect you'll see some of that in the Denver market too, as prices are shooting up and they're cashing out that equity. And it takes, as they move, they'll take about half of that equity and buy that next home. So that's the most important fact to understand is if they move and I own and sell a house that's $900,000, they're going to buy a $450,000 house. And that is consistent. The reality is if they don't, their mortgage is probably worth about $450,000 and they're keeping that $450,000 in a different kind of account. And that is translated to no mortgage payment in that category, right? So it's really interesting to look at, but yes, if they can stay in place, they will. And we do have some percentages on that. So if you want to email me on that, I can give you the exact numbers.
We have another follow-up from Stephanie with Remax. Are most home builders not including basements for more affordability?
Good question. So for the Denver market, it's about 50-50 want a basement or don't. And so what I usually will say to, no, I take that back. About 50% actually want to pay for a finished basement. And so the translation there is it all comes down to, again, what can I afford and what are my choices? And so what's happening on the builder side of things is basements are going away to some degree just to meet affordability. So, and that cost to build the basement can be anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000, and then you finish it, and that could take that price up for that basement all the way up to $100,000 to $120,000. More commonly, it's in the $40,000 to $60,000 range, but it's just about meeting, you know, the lifestyle and affordability of the consumer and giving them what they want. They all want, you know, a 4,000 square foot house if they can, but the builder is really meeting the affordability of the market for sure. And I would caution, you know, where I've seen projects get into trouble, and I've done a lot of troubleshooting on those projects, is I've gone in and the builder has shown the fully finished basement. All their specs have fully finished basements, and they're so expensive that they can't afford them. And the customer doesn't want to compromise because they're seeing a fully finished basement in this house that they love. So I would be cautious to show a wide range of size. And again, because of how expensive your markets become, thank God for equity. But to really continue to get that market you aren't hitting today, you've got to get smaller and you've got to get to price points they can afford. What else?
I have one more. Stephanie, you had a follow-up just to clarify. You said it cost a builder $60,000 just to lay groundwork for a basement without finishing? ?
No. So what I'm saying is the cost for a basement ranges, and it can range anywhere from, I've heard it as low in the Midwest as 15,000, but on average, it's usually in that 25 to 30 range unfinished. Then as you finish it, it can go from 40,000 on up. So it just depends on how you finish it. Did that answer the question?
I think so. This is a great question. Kristen Peterson. Mollie, speaking from California and understanding the context of fires and rebuild with the traumatic Marshall Fire that we've just experienced, do you think that will change how we build in Colorado?
You know, it's an interesting question. Well, I can't completely answer that because, you know, depends on who comes up with the most creative solutions. I can tell you honestly, in California, it hasn't. And we've had horrific fires. The only categories where it begins to change is when you back up to these large kind of forest open spaces, and then they'll require that you have certain fire protection on the outside. You can't have wood fascias. Like they'll force a certain standard on the edges of anything that faces open space. I'd be shocked if they don't do that today. That would be the biggest category of change, and that's not by choice, because the customer usually doesn't come in and say, hey, I'm sitting on this great view. I really want to have a less attractive back to my backyard and make it fire retardant, because it can be unattractive, honestly, some of the things you have to do. But I know in a lot of communities that I've worked on that open up to those, that is the requirement. So if it's not there today, I can't imagine they wouldn't be thinking about that. And it's really responsible to be thinking about that, whether it's required or not. Any other questions?
Molly, I had a question regarding wellness. I know that a lot of people have transitioned to working out from home, but we know wellness is a much larger term. Could you speak for a second about trends that you're seeing with interiors in regard to wellness?
You bet. You know what? And I actually had a slide on it, and I noticed I had deleted it. But as you can see, this is a fully packed presentation. Interestingly enough, fitness in the community center used to be more important than the community club. So that was clearly a high ranking amenity. And today people really want fitness at home. I mean, I think through COVID, people figured out how to get fitness working at home. And, you know, they're saving that $65 to $200 a month for whatever gym membership they have. And it's trying to figure out, how do I get that to work and still have all the bedrooms and all of the spaces and places I need to have in my home. So being creative with that. There is a great video. I talk about it a lot. It's Lab, LAAB. It's a home in Beijing, 385 square feet. And he basically asked the architect, he wanted a gourmet kitchen. He wanted a media room. He wanted a soaker tub in his master bath. He wanted to have a guest bedroom. And in this 385 square feet, oh, and he wanted a gym at home. And that was the tie back to you, Kate, is he shows how to achieve all that. Oh, and he wanted a pet space. So it's interesting how creative you can be and do those kinds of things and still have that gym at home. But it has to be almost, that's where you have sort of those flex spaces, right? So whether it's, you know, in their particular case, they did those bands and you actually could hook it up to something in the hallway and literally do all kinds of exercises. It was pretty interesting to think, gosh, you really can make it work just about anywhere. We're seeing, frankly, in the remodel and probably more on the resale side. And I think you have to think about it on the new home side too. I mean, really the garage has become the fitness room in a lot of cases, right? So, because you can't give up the bedroom because now you're trying to figure out how to get an office, you know, for 1, 2, or 3 people. So that's part of it. But yeah, definitely growing big, but pushing more to home along with everything else. And not just because of COVID, I think people again have figured out how to make it work. And I also think just the pure walking in the neighborhood and the socializing part of that's become a big thing too. Because they miss people. I don't know about you guys, but as much as I don't leave home as much, it's just when I come to an event and I see people, I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. So it's nice.
One final question from Eric Scott. With everyone working at home and spending more time at home, do you see ADUs becoming more popular and accepted by jurisdictions and municipalities?
No question. It's on fire right now. So if you have the land for it, ADUs are absolutely on fire right now. And the great thing about an ADU, I think, is they're extremely economical right now. There's a lot of companies coming out, so it's a very competitive business. You can get an ADU today. God, I think I've seen them as low as 15,000, believe it or not. But it's all what you want in that ADU too, right? So more commonly, they're closer to, you know, 75 to 100. But absolutely. And in California, now you can have 2 houses on one lot and they can't even challenge you on it. So ADUs are just, tearing it up here. And I suspect that will happen everywhere. The other big thing with an ADU to think about is just with aging parents. The cost of adult care is huge. And I just think more and more people are living so much longer. And so accommodating that is huge. It's a good point, though. Make a note on that.
I'm going to leave this final slide up for a few more moments. If you want to capture Mollie's information, I'm sure everyone will have more questions and thoughts, and we're all buzzing with all of your genius, Mollie. So thank you so much for your time and your enthusiasm. And Kristen's asking about the survey link that will be emailed to everyone registered on the event. Yes, and please fill out the survey so we can make sure we're providing the right content from our council. Again, thank you, Mollie, and all of your insight at Zonda. We appreciate your time. It was wonderful. We got a lot of thank yous on the chat. So thank you again. Everyone have a wonderful Monday. Make your last day of January count. All right.
Thanks, Mollie. Have a great 2022. It was great spending time with you. Take care.
Bye.